Okay, so some of you e-learners at home might be wondering exactly how to get started on this roller coaster project and what the expectations are. Well, a couple of things to know about it is a 20-point summative. Okay, so it is going to be a 20-point summative assessment. So you need to make sure you do it and you do it well to the best of your abilities and get it submitted on time, please. Okay, with that being said, what you're going to be doing is designing a roller coaster, which you can kind of see from the directions here, okay? And you're going to be using Desmos, which means Desmos is going to do a lot of the work for you. What you have to do is be willing to mess with the numbers, move things around, try different values in order to get the roller coaster to look like what you want it to look like, okay? So when we're looking at our graph, you're going to have our Desmos graph, and really you're only going to need the first quadrant, okay? Because if you think about a roller coaster, we are going to have our x-axis is going to be time in minutes, okay? And our y-axis is going to be the height of the roller coaster, okay? And the height you can put in units that you want. If you have a very small roller coaster, you can put it in, say, the height is, for every foot or every unit is 10 feet or something like that. It kind of depends on what your roller coaster ends up looking like. And so when you're doing this, there's certain things your roller coaster has to have. And so one of them is you have to have at least one bounce. Okay, so that means your roller coaster at some point needs to come down, and it doesn't matter when, but it needs to come down and bounce off the x-axis. Okay, so we don't need to have an arrow there because our roller coaster is going to continue. So we need to have at least one bounce, and remember, to get a bounce, that means you have to have a multiplicity of 2. So like you would have to have x minus 2 times x minus 2 or x minus 2 squared, okay? At least 2 real roots or solutions, which means it just basically has to cross, bounce, wiggle, or something like that at least twice, and at least one imaginary solution. Keeping in mind, in order to get an imaginary solution, every one of our factors gets set equal to 0. Okay, so if you think about how to get an imaginary solution, you need to have the square root of a negative number, which means something on the inside of your factor, you're going to have it squared. You're going to have to add something to it, like whatever works for your roller coaster. Okay, because if I had x squared plus 5, if I subtracted 5, took the square root, I'd have the square root of negative 5, which would give me an imaginary solution. And then you need to have at least 3 maximum minimums, which means like here would be a maximum, here would be a minimum. I need at least one more, so I need another place where it's going to at least come up and cross to have another max. Remember, the max is the high and the minimum is the low. You need to have at least one tunnel, which means at some point your roller coaster is going to have to dive down below ground and come back up. Okay, and then restrict your domain so that your roller coaster starts at 0 and ends where you want it to. Basically, it's x is your domain, and how many minutes is your roller coaster going to be. And I'll show you on an example of a graph here in just a minute how you can restrict that. And your ride must end and start above ground, so you can't have people go. Okay, so that's kind of the introduction of what you're going to do. And then the next slide is going to show you like exactly what is going to be graded. So you're going to make a Desmos graph, okay? And on the next slide, I'll show you an example of that. And you're going to get your Desmos graph with your, it's going to be, when you type your stuff into Desmos, it's going to be in factored form. I'll show you that here in just a second, okay? And so you're going to have your factored form equation, and your graph is going to do what you want it to do. You're going to write the completely, and you're going to put all of this in a GoodNotes document so you can submit it. So you're going to screenshot your Desmos graph, put it in GoodNotes, and then the rest of this stuff needs to be in the GoodNotes file also. Not necessarily on the same slide, but somewhere in your GoodNotes file. Okay, so you're going to have the completely factored form, which that should be in Desmos. That should be the form that you use, okay? And then, just like we did the other day with the homework, you're going to take that factored form and multiply it all out to get standard form, okay? Once it's in standard form, you're going to take your zeros, which is going to be the places where it crosses the x-axis, and you're going to perform synthetic division to verify the correctness, and then show that your imaginary solutions are there also. So that means, so say your graph crosses the x-axis at 1, 2, 3. I get 1 and 3. Okay, that means you would perform synthetic division. So say it does this. That's the part where maybe it goes into a tunnel. You'd need to perform synthetic division at 1 and at 3 with your standard form, and just like we did until you get down to the point where you have only imaginary solutions, and then you're going to show what your imaginary solutions are. Okay, so then you are going to describe the end behavior. What's it doing where the roller coaster starts, and what's it doing where it stops, and kind of explain what that means. State the practical domain. Okay, remember that the practical domain is just basically your restriction that you put in on your Desmos graph. It's like, how long is your ride? It's between 0 and how many minutes, and it needs to be a practical domain. You can't have a 25-minute roller coaster ride, or you're going to have everybody throwing up everywhere all the time, and it would be too long. So your practical domain is just basically how long is your roller coaster, and I'll show you how to write that. And then your practical range, basically how tall is your roller coaster, because range is y values, up and down. What's your highest point and what's your lowest point? That's going to be your practical range. And then you, just like we did in the lesson video the other day, you're going to color the graph blue where it's increasing and red where it is decreasing. And then you're going to have a little fun and going to just decorate it, put a roller coaster cart on there. You can draw little people in there if you want, have some fun with it. And so all of those things need to be in your GoodNotes file and when you submit it. So I have an example on the next slide of just a very basic graph to kind of get you guys started on how it can actually look. So what I have over here is the factored form of my equation. Okay, and if you notice, I can adjust my a value out here in front. I right now have it as a decimal. It can be a positive, it can be a negative, it can be a whole number, it can be a large number, it can be a small number, it can be a tiny, tiny decimal. So if you're having trouble getting your graph where you want it to be, try messing with your a value just a little bit. I have here at, let's see, x minus 1, that's right here. That's my bounce because I have x minus 1 squared. And then I have x minus 2, it's crossing at 2. And then here is my imaginary solution. And then it's crossing again at 4. Now that might not be what I want my roller coaster to look like. And you'll notice that it keeps going down. You'll have to move your screen on Desmos and stuff to see how far down your roller coaster goes. And sometimes it'll come up very high, and you'll have to kind of move your graph to see how high and make sure it's a practical range. Make sure your roller coaster is not going up to like 25,000 feet or something like that, because then your roller coaster would be interfering with air traffic, with airplanes. So what this right here is, the 0 is less than x, is less than x is less than 5, right there. Let me highlight that. That is my restriction, okay? That tells me that my ride, so this is my restriction, and that tells me my ride is between 0 to 5 minutes long. Basically, it tells me I am only looking at my roller coaster from where I start at 0 minutes to 5 minutes where my roller coaster ends. Okay, so that's what the restriction is, and that's your domain as well. Okay, if you look at my graph, you can't really tell what the range is right now because you can't see how far down. I think it actually, my graph went down to like -50 or something like that. I can't remember. I'd have to look back. And it went, and it started up here a little bit higher. So your range is just going to be what's your highest point and what's your lowest point, and then put it in this form like this also, except instead of x, you'd have a y. Okay, so hopefully that helps you with getting started on your roller coaster project. If you have any other questions, feel free to email me or let me know in one way or the other. I would be more than happy to help you out. So good luck, and let me know if you need any help.